This is Balanand Pinni trying to talk about biometrics as part of the GaTech class. Uh, what is biometrics? Biometrics is something related with measurement of physiological attributes that are unique. And these attributes can be used to identify, to authenticate a person. Let's look at what are the unique traits and how these are used in defense and highly secured areas of security. Biometric authentication, by definition itself, it means a process of comparing the characteristics of a person with the existing template. Usually, these templates are in the database where they had pre-stored their identity. The identity comes in various forms. These are called pictorial identities, and also some of the identities of the physical characteristics of a person. And due to undesirable circumstances like threats from crime and terrorism, these techniques have been implemented at a large scale. These are implemented to avoid it would be easy for an organization to share its database with other authorities, or these are called as authorized, to identify and authenticate in a very fast way, but with no false negatives. These could be like shape of a hand or a finger. Honestly, the way it is to check the various patterns, the iris or a retina, or an eye characteristics. The DNA from a blood or a saliva could be another way of identifying. These measurements are stable and could be span of individuals. There are two kinds of biometrics. One is physiological, another is behavioral. And the face, fingerprint, hand, iris, and DNA are the ones which are static, whereas keystroke, signature, and voice are dynamic. Looking back in the history, during the time of uh, old days of the Chinese emperor, second century BC, the biometrics were being used to authenticate individuals, and also by the French police officer who used it for his research to measure and to identify criminals. Time Before the time, criminals could only be identified by name or a photograph, but this method helped them, which supplemented by fingerprinting. There were several photographs of the criminals that were taken in those days due to invention of photography. But there should be a process to standardize. So, to standardize some process, this was continued. In US, it was initiated by New York Police in 1902 and by the FBI in 1924. UK, it was in 1901, and French police started in 1902. During the World War II, Allied forces used this method to identify the senders and authentication messages they received. Like in older days, people got identified. They were sending telegraph Morse codes with dots and dashes. Let's look at the identities that look in different categories, like something you have, something you know, and something you are. And then the last one, C, is the one what we are talking here is something you are. That is what you have as a physical attribute, or an attribute which is related to his or her complete life cycle. This method guarantees the level of accuracy with the individual. The error rate is so low that it's almost negligible. As you can see, something said by Sir Francis Galton that the probability of finding two similar fingerprints would be 1 in 64 billion. Areas of usage is law enforcement, border control, healthcare, population and voter registration. And there are certain risks that have been identified with biometrics. Imagine if the data is getting transmitted and can be captured fraudulently and replicated to another transaction. In other words, the data can be transmitted during the transmission time. You can replicate it. Another way of doing is a third party. If third party is having, instead of using it for a particular purpose that they have to use it, they could use it for a different purpose than what it was actually meant for, because to hold the biometrics in the database, it would require the consent of a person whose biometric it is. Areas of usage: law enforcement, border control, healthcare, population voter registration. Benefits of biometrics: guarantees the level of accuracy with an individual. The error rate is so low that's almost negligible. You can see there. And next, if you look at other United Nations resolutions, which are the legal and also some deliberations vary on the personal data in the broad sense, and some of the European regulation replaces the existing national laws. The General Data Protection Regulation is directly applicable to European Union UK also. However, the companies had to be very careful when they roll out the authentication method to avoid infringing on employee or customer privacy, because it could improperly expose the information. One can replace the passwords, but not the retina or eyeball or fingers, which are the physical attributes of a person. The biometrics authentication is done different ways. Retina scan, which because retina has some blood vessels pattern in the light sensitive surface, is the part of the inner eye. The iris recognition is to identify the individuals based on unique patterns within the ring shaped surrounding the eye pupil. Finger scanning, where finger is scanned for raised areas, branches in human finger image. The other is finger vein ID, is the web is based on the vascular pattern of the individual finger. The other pattern is the facial recognition. The systems work with numeric codes of the face prints, which identify 80 nodal points on a human face. The voice identification works as per the individual shape of the mouth and throat rather than other variable conditions. New areas of research have been done in the field of eye, where, along with the retina and iris, additional attribute, sclera, was used. And this was actually patented very recently, where it is not just the eye that they are taking one kind of attribute, but total the white part of the eye, which is called sclera, and under the white part of the eye was taken separately, and the algorithms were built to come up with a unique vein patterns like fingerprints, which were identified branches of the ridges. The algorithms were developed to identify the process images with unique patterns in person's eye, thus confirming the identification as more authenticate as second and third factor, as we call it, as a not just looking at the circle around the pupil or just at the retina, but also at the blood vessels in the sclera, where algorithms were developed to match. Biometric errors could happen because the false positive, innocent people are falsely identified. False negatives where real criminals could evade the biometric detection. And persons never enrolled, so he could get away with the database did not have 100%. The database is never 100% complete. So in that case, he will not be able to get detected. It could also happen because of chemical accidents. The patterns get altered and hence detection cannot be made from the previous existing database. Because the accidents can alter the physical conditions and the patterns of the hand or the eye. Then also because of, say, plastic surgeries, for example. Also, people who use their physical fingers for a long period of time, like laborers, musicians who play piano or the guitar, the ridges can get damaged over the period of time and cannot be recognized. Old people and children produce less distinctive patterns, and this could lead to inconsistencies with respect to the database, and matches could be false positives. And lastly, but not the least, are the two papers that I have used for writing this particular case study are given in the last sheet. Thank you.